You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today I'm going to be previewing the 49ers defense going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. So we're going to talk all about it. But before we do that, let's just set the stage with the injury reports coming in from both teams. So the 49ers, obviously, that should say out, not do not practice, but out is Jimmy Garoppolo, Tarvarius Moore, Hassan Ridgeway. All three of those guys are out. And then Nick Bosa is questionable. I meant to put questionable there. He is questionable. Nick Bosa has not practiced at all this week. But it seems like he's one of those players that doesn't need to practice in order to, potentially play in the game, similar to how the 49ers handled Deebo Samuel last week. You recall he didn't practice much at all. I think he only practiced limitedly on, is that a word? Limitedly? Yeah. I think he practiced on Friday, I believe. One second. I'm going to fix that slide because it's going to drive me nuts. So he practiced on Friday, and he still ended up playing. So I would imagine something similar for Nick Bosa. He's questionable, but I think he's probably going to suit up. But I don't know. It could go either way. So there you go. Nick Bosa with this hamstring. He is questionable. And the one thing that Kyle Shanahan did mention is that they have to be mindful of the fact that they do play on a short week next week. They are playing against the Seahawks, a important, NFC West game against them that they'll definitely want to win. Of course, they want to win this week as well because it's also an NFC opponent. But got to be mindful of the short week and thinking about Nick Bosa. If he is active, maybe he doesn't play the full amount of snaps. Not entirely sure, but we'll have to wait and see for Sunday on Nick Bosa's status. It would be a shame if he were not active, given the fact that, as we see here on the right, the Bucs are going to be without their right tackle, Tristan Wirfs, as well as both of their safeties, Mike Edwards and Antoine Winfield. Those are huge. Well, actually, they're doubtful, those three, but it's more than likely when you're doubtful, you're probably not going to play, hence the designation doubtful. So I would imagine those guys are going to be out, and that's a huge blow for the Bucs. And on the questionable side, they have their corner, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Leonard Fournette, and defensive tackle Akeem Hicks. I would expect all three of those guys to go. But of course, we'll just have to wait for Sunday for that. And let's just get right into the Tampa Bay offense, okay? Because this is what we're up against this week. Let me move this out of the way. So here we go. Battle. It's going to be a battle, okay? And I just want to say the Bucs are somewhat one-dimensional. So let me read off some of these stats for you. They are first in passing play percentage at 67%. They pass the ball 67% of the time. That is more than anyone else in the NFL. And they are also first in QB sacked percentage. They are tied for second in giveaways per game, which means they don't turn the ball over much. And they are fifth in passing yards per game, sixth in punt attempts per game, eighth in completion percentage, 17th in total yards per game, 27th in touchdowns per game, 27th in points per game, 28th in average time of possession, 32nd in rushing yards per game, and 32nd in rushing play percentage. So let me just summarize all of that for you, because that was a lot of information, right? Basically, they're very one-dimensional. They pass the ball a ton, more than anyone per their amount of offensive snaps, and they run it the least out of anyone too. But despite throwing the ball a lot, Brady is still rarely getting sacked, and he isn't throwing a lot of interceptions. So that becomes a little tougher to defend, something to keep in mind. Because usually when you would think that when a team passes more, there would be more opportunities for the defense to get sacks, and there'd be more opportunities for the defense to get interceptions. And that's true. They do have more opportunities, but they're just not getting the sacks and interceptions. And there's somewhat a reason for that. I'll talk about that later. But also, despite throwing the ball a lot and fairly efficiently, as noted by being 8th in completion percentage, Tom Brady there, they punt a ton. They're not putting up a lot of points, and they do not often win the average time of possession. That last one is probably because they pass the ball so much. So it's if you don't extend your drives, you are going to be punting more. You're going to be giving the ball to your opponent quicker, because typically pass plays go by a lot quicker than run plays. And so the Bucs offense is just a trip to me. Like it's quite the paradox. They're passing a ton, not getting a lot of points. So I don't really know. The math kind of ain't mathing with them, and especially with their record, being pretty mid-average. You would expect a lot more from their offense, but really, their defense is just so good, which I think is deserves a big credit for that. But also they have a lot of talent on their offense, I'd say. I mean, so just another reason to scratch your head a little bit on this offense. But let's talk about the battle of the trenches, okay? And I'm going to make this a little easier for you guys to see here. So the most notable matchup here is obviously at right tackle. As I mentioned, Tristan Wirfs is doubtful for this game, so we are likely to see their backup right tackle in Josh Wells going up against Nick Bosa, of course, if Nick Bosa plays, and Samson Ebukam. So last week against the Saints, Josh Wells allowed 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a quarterback hit. Donovan Smith, their left tackle, struggled against the Saints as well. He allowed 5 pressures, 4 hurries, and a quarterback hit. But still, they're not giving up sacks. Despite struggling, I think the Saints only got 1 sack on Brady last week. And so, for what it's worth, they were also able to get an interception. So, maybe there's some give there to be able to get at least 1 sack and 1 interception from Brady, because the Saints defense, as we know now, is pretty good. 49ers defense, also pretty good, probably a little better than the Saints. So I would say there's an opportunity for the 49ers defense, although it isn't going to be easy. And I'm convinced that the Bucs offensive linemen, they're just terrified of Brady and getting yelled at, because anytime they give up sacks, he is going to be in their face yelling at them. So I would also be terrified of that. So I get it. Let's look at some comments here. Melissa says, "Hey, Steph, you listened to John Chapman earlier. He had glowing words to say about you." Oh, that's awesome. I did not catch that, but I'll probably have to catch that just to boost my ego a little bit. But I love John. He's awesome. I saw him last week at the 49ers Rush meetup that he had, and that was great. So I'm sure everything that he said in that video, he said to me in person last weekend. So yeah, appreciate John a lot. Thanks, Melissa, for passing that along. Monica says, "My notifications are working now." Yes, my cousin right here, Monica. I'm glad your notifications are on. If you guys are subscribed but don't have notifications on, turn them on, because you'll be notified whenever I go live. And so you won't miss anything. You'll be able to comment on these live videos and whatnot. So thank you. All right. Moving on though. Look, I'm just going to say Eric Armstead being back, I think, is huge for this team. I think we've seen just in the short time of him being back last week how much of an impact this man has on everyone else. I would give, if assists were, I know that assists exist in the NFL as a stat, but it's when you assist in a tackle, and that's the only way you get it. If assists were tracked the same way that the NBA does it, where like, okay, I helped this guy get his shot because I passed it to him, that is kind of like what I think of Eric Armstead and what he does. He does like basketball assists for the rest of the guys on this defensive line, and I would have credited Eric Armstead with 2 basketball, quote unquote, assists for Nick Bosa and his 2 sacks, and 2 of his sacks last week. Bosa had 3 sacks last week, but at least 2 of them I would have given credit to Eric Armstead for, because just the impact that he's able to have on the defensive line helps open things up for Bosa so much more. So I'm glad to have Eric Armstead back. I think that's going to be huge. Second week in a row for him to be back. And hopefully Nick Bosa can play, because obviously with the right tackle being out, there's definitely an opportunity for Nick Bosa to, potentially get a sack in this one. But let's talk about the Bucs tight ends. Some of these guys that Tom Brady is going to be passing to. They have Cade Otton. I don't know if it's Otton or Otten, but Cade, that's how I know him. They are one of the Saints are one of the best teams defending against tight ends this season. Why do I mention that? Because the Bucs played the Saints last week. And so the Saints are right up there with the 49ers as far as how they defend against tight ends. 49ers also one of the top teams against tight ends. So last week against the Saints, Otton had 10 targets, and he had 6 catches for 28 yards and a touchdown. So clearly Tom Brady, does not shy away from targeting his tight end. I mean, we know how much he loved to target, Gronk when he played with him. And so Brady likes throwing to his tight ends, clearly. Last week, Cameron Brate, their other tight end, did not play. So that also could have been part of the reason that, Otton got more targets. And I would expect Brate will be active this week, because he only wasn't active last week because of an illness. So he's not injured really. So he'll be back. And so they'll split snaps and they'll split targets at tight end this week. So the key takeaway, though, despite being targeted 10 times, yes, he had the 6 catches, but he only had 28 yards. He did have the touchdown too. The 49ers, by the way, have only allowed 2 touchdowns to tight ends this season. It was both against the Falcons and both of their tight ends. So I don't think that the Bucs are going to get a touchdown with their tight end this week, but we could see a similar stat line of 6 catches for 28 yards, like something similar like that, because the 49ers, these linebackers don't give up a lot to tight ends when defending them, and they'll have a tough date this week against Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Let's talk about the Bucs receivers. They have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, both really talented players. Mike Evans, of course, let's see here. Yeah, so Mike Evans, for those of you watching on video, sorry for the audio listeners, but I'll kind of describe what we're looking at. I'm showing Next Gen Stats route charts. And so the one for Mike Evans is from a few weeks ago against the Chiefs. I believe actually is from like week 4 or something like that. But Chris Godwin's is from last week. And so in the last few weeks, Chris Godwin has really hit a stride in his return from injury this season, because was it ACL or Achilles for Godwin? I think it was ACL. So this is his first season back, and it was kind of slow sledding for Godwin for the beginning of the year, but he's really caught a stride in these last few weeks. So Godwin is a very talented receiver. He'd be the wide receiver 1 on any team. I mean, honestly, Mike Evans and Godwin are kind of like a wide receiver 1A, 1B kind of thing. And so that is very challenging for defenses. So, Mike Evans, the uh, huge receiver who can be a threat in the red zone. And as you can see from this past chart here, I mean, he can, against the Chiefs earlier this season, he had 8 receptions for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Godwin is more of the guy out of the slot. He can get yards after the catch, but both very talented guys. And so also they have Julio Jones and Russell Gage. They don't get targeted as much, but you might hear their names get called. You might see them get targeted and get a few catches in this game. So another tough challenge for this 49ers secondary, especially for Diamador Lenore. But I will say, after last week, I was encouraged. I mean, yeah, he lucked out a little bit because Jalen Waddle last week was in and out of the game with what appeared to be an ankle injury or something. He definitely wasn't 100%, even when he was out there. So, Lenore lucked out a little bit, but I was still impressed because he was targeted 5 times. He only allowed 1 catch for 19 yards, and he had an interception. He allowed a passer rating of 3.3 last week against the Dolphins, and that's really impressive. I called it a big challenge for Diamador Lenore last week in my preview episode. He gets another challenge this week, but I'm feeling good that he could have another solid showing. And yeah, I mean, that's good news for the 49ers because they're going to need a really strong, confident Lenore for this final stretch and, potentially in the playoffs as well, because they're going to be facing a lot of teams with 2 really good, maybe even 3 really good wide receivers. And all of these corners need to be on point. So I've been pleased with Lenore for the most part. So happy for him. But, who has been getting targeted quite a lot for the Bucs lately is actually their running back, their rookie running back, Rachaad White. Now, I'm actually a big fan of Rachaad White. I liked him coming out of the draft. He kind of reminded me of Raheem Mostert a little bit, not because of his speed, obviously. I don't think there's not a lot of running backs who have Mostert's speed, but more so because how he is able to catch out of the backfield. He runs very upright, which reminds me of Mostert a lot. But I liked Rachaad White coming out of the draft. And so the Bucs got a good one in him, and they're kind of leaning into using Rachaad White a little bit more. They still have Leonard Fournette. He's still getting the bulk of the carries, but bulk is a strong word since they don't run it that much, and they've been using Rachaad White a little bit more, especially out of the backfield. Last week, Leonard Fournette had 10 carries for 49 yards. He also had 6 catches for 32 yards. So assuming Leonard Fournette plays, he's still going to be in the mix. He's still going to be involved. Even though they don't run the ball a lot, they pass it to Fournette too. But Rachaad White, he's getting a lot of action as well. The last 2 weeks, in week 12, Rachaad White had 9 catches for 45 yards. Last week against the Saints, he had 6 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown. So he's a very talented player and someone that's going to keep the 49ers defense on their toes. I think a few weeks ago when the Bucs played the Seahawks, you'll see here, I don't think that was a game that Fournette was out for, but he had 22 carries in that game and 105 yards. So he's just as dangerous as a pure running back as well. He, like I said, just a very talented guy, and they can use him a variety of ways. So Rachaad White is someone that I would pay attention a lot to in this matchup. I think it's going to be a real heads-up game for the linebackers and the safeties and even the corners, because our corners are solid at stopping running backs and getting stops. So they, I think, could also be really busy in this game. But just something to keep in mind. You're going to be hearing the name Rachaad White quite a lot in this game. me see some comments here. So Michelle says, looks like there will be some rain at Levi's on Sunday. I'm bringing my poncho. Who do you think has an advantage on a wet field? Well, let me double check the weather because, yeah, I did check that yesterday, but weather changes every day. I know. So 100% chance for rain on Saturday. I imagine they'll have the tarp on the field. But Sunday, I am seeing, yeah, it looks like most of the rain on Sunday is going to be in the early hours before sunrise, probably. Well, if the sun even rises, but you know what I mean. It'll be between midnight and 6 a.m. It's looking like. So I would, let's see. So yeah, that's what, if you guys could see that. 6 a.m., between 12 and 6 a.m., and it's not going to be a lot. So I don't know if the rain will even impact the game at all. I think it'll be similar to last week where there was rain on the forecast. It again, last week rained all of Saturday, but then Sunday it was fine. So I think it's going to be similar. But in the case that it does rain, I don't know who it benefits, but just keep in mind that Tom Brady has played in the snow and worse conditions, so I don't think it's going to phase him all that much, if at all. And I don't know, it'll definitely benefit defenses, though. I know that much, but yeah, I have a feeling it's not going to be that big of a deal, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Melissa asks, who stays leading the team? Huff interceptions or big play Dre with tackles? You asking about the stats, or you mean in this game? Let's see. I think Dre Greenlaw is probably gonna continue his streak of having a bunch of tackles, just because, like I said, Tom Brady does not throw interceptions very often, and I think there's going to be more opportunities for Greenlaw to get additional tackles in this game. So I'm going to go with big play Dre. Oh, both year and game. I have to look up the stats on that one, but if I have time at the end, I'll look that up. Obviously Greenlaw is going to have more tackles than Hufanga has interceptions, but I think they both. I'll look that up, though, who leads the league in tackles and interceptions. But let's talk about Tom Brady really quick. All right, he's kind of an important guy in this game. Last week, he threw it 36 times, which is it's the fourth time this season he's had 35 or more pass attempts. And that's pretty crazy because what is he like? Is he 43? Is it like 43, 45? To be throwing that often in your 40s and, still being pretty good at it, like that's pretty incredible. Like I said, he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He's only thrown 2 total interceptions in the last 3 weeks. Actually, so I shouldn't say only, but that's probably the most he's had in that stretch, right, of 3 weeks, 2 interceptions the last 3 weeks. But he had also gone 8 games in a row without throwing an interception before that. So don't really know what to expect. I mean, is he kind of regressing on his touchdown interception ratio? I don't know. That if so, that could be an opportunity for this defense. It's another tough matchup for Brady, so it could lead to an interception, but I am not betting on it. If it happens, I'm going to be ecstatic. It's obviously a great thing for this defense if they're able to do that. But for the most part, he's been taking care of the football. Last week against the Saints, he threw it 54 times, and he completed 36 of his passes. He had 281 yards and 2 touchdowns and the 1 interception. So, and if you look for the audio listeners, I'll just describe what we're looking at here. We're seeing his passing chart from last week's game. Credit to Next Gen Stats. A lot of these are short passes. I mean, and most of his passes, his attempts downfield fell incomplete. like all of them did actually. It looks like he had four pass attempts beyond 15 yards, and they all went incomplete. So wait, no, I'm sorry. One of them was incomplete. He had five attempts, and one of them was incomplete. One of them was complete. Sorry, but for the most part, a lot of these passes are pretty short. Most of them are around the line of scrimmage, within 10 yards. So we know Tom Brady is a great quarterback. So not doubting that at all. But he's a different kind of quarterback these days where he is, focusing on the shorter areas of the field. And that's where the 49ers are somewhat best at, especially in the middle short areas of the field. So that could present a challenge for Tom Brady, although I'm pretty sure Tom Brady has overcome many challenges in his very long career. And the one thing I'll point out, he's been getting the ball out quicker than any other starting quarterback this season. And that's incredible. And that's part of the reason I think you're not going to see a lot of sacks on Tom Brady. It's part of the reason that, he's not turning the ball over much. So it's hard to get pressure on him because he's getting the ball out so quickly. For reference, Tua Tagovailoa and Andy Dalton were both getting the ball out at 2.6 seconds. And we consider those challenges for this defense because when the quarterback gets the ball out that quickly, it's very difficult for the defensive line to get home to get pressure on the quarterback just because it's so fast. If Tom Brady's getting the ball out even quicker than both of those guys, yeah, this is going to be a challenge. I don't expect a lot of sacks. I know that the right tackle is going to be out, but even then, it's going to be difficult for this defensive line to get to Brady, even with the offensive line shorthanded. And so I think this is going to be a bigger game for the secondary than the defensive line, kind of like what we saw last week. Yeah, I know Nick Bosa had 3 sacks last week, but I truly think it's going to be a tougher go this time because Brady just gets it out that much quicker, and those 0.2 seconds could be the difference between getting the ball out and getting a sack. So yeah, it's going to be an important game for the secondary, and this is why these are my keys for the game for this defense. They got to cover well off of the snap. And that's easier said than done. And the 49ers defense, they play a lot of zone, so they don't often do that. But at the very least, if they disrupt timing, I've credited the defense for disrupting Tua's timing just enough where he floated some throws, I thought, because the defense was he didn't have those quick passes. He kind of had to think about it a little bit more and go through his progression, something he's not used to. Tom Brady, of course, experienced quarterback. If he gets in that predicament, he's going to know how to go through his progressions just fine because he's been in that situation before. He has a lot of poise in the pocket, things like that. The one thing with Brady, though, is that he's not much of an escaper of the pocket. He's somewhat of a statue in his older age, not as athletic. I'm not saying he can't run, but he's not as fast. We all know he's pretty slow. So that could be a good thing for the defense. But as long as they can disrupt timing, make him go through his progressions, force him to go through his progressions rather than, have the first available option open for him, just that alone can help give the defensive line more time to get to Tom Brady and create more pressure. Easier said than done, though. I know that. And another thing is they're going to need to tackle well because, they don't run the ball very often, but I think they're going to try to involve Rachaad White out of the backfield quite a lot. Even Fournette will get some catches. So I think they're going to try to get those guys going. And so it'll be important for the defense, linebackers, everyone to tackle well, especially because everything is like all of the passes for the most part are pretty short. You can really get them in a third and short situation if you just tackle well. So for the defense, that's always a good thing if you can get them to third down. And finally, my last key for the defense is get off the field on third downs because, as I mentioned in the beginning here, let me pull that up again. As I mentioned earlier, the Bucs offense is 6th in punt attempts per game. So they punt the ball quite a lot. And so that right there is a great opportunity for the defense to take advantage of that and for they themselves to get off the field, remain fresh. I think also it'll be important for the 49ers offense to, sustain drives and win the time of possession and, don't give the Brady and the Bucs offense time to come back on you because they have shown the ability to come back on some teams. Just last week he had the fourth quarter comeback. So it'll be important for all of these things to go right. I think this is going to be a tougher game than some of us might realize. Bucs are a really tough defense, and so that's the thing I'm worried about with Brock Purdy starting. The defense is going to have to be like A1, and they have been. So I'm encouraged by that, but they can't slip up. The Bucs as well are coming off a short week, so I think it's a good opportunity to find the Bucs offensive line, maybe a little tired from playing not too long ago. So great opportunity for the defensive line. They have that going for them. But yeah, it's going to be a tough game. My prediction for this one is 19-17 49ers win it. Let's see. Melissa asks, Steph, who is more likely to be kept, DFF or Aziz? Personally, rather have Oren Burks, let the others get paid elsewhere. Oh, God. I would love Aziz. I'd love to keep Aziz on this team. But he's played pretty great. And I don't know if they can afford all these guys, right? So that might be a cap casualty that they have to let either one of those guys go. Not a huge fan of Oren Burks. He's not terrible, but he's not Aziz Al-Shaair. So that would be my first choice. Melissa also asks, do you think Nick can break the sack record of 22.5? And do you think 10 more sacks in the next 5 or possibly 4 if sat to be healthy for Thursday Night Football is possible? Man, I think he does break the record. Well, no, I don't think he breaks the NFL record for sacks, but I do think he gets his 20-piece. He is on pace to break the 20-piece goal that he had, so I'm pulling for him to get that. I don't think he breaks the sack record though. That would be pretty tough, especially if he doesn't play on Sunday. Even if he does play, I have a feeling they might limit his snaps a little bit. So that would make it difficult for him to get a sack. But I mean, it's Nick Bosa. Anything can happen. But definitely playing some great football right now. Should be the front runner for DPOY. What's going on, Bryant? Quick reminder for everyone, make sure that you like this video. If you have not yet, make sure you subscribe if you have not yet, because if you are not subscribed, what are you doing? And if you're subscribed but you don't have notifications on, turn those on so you always know when I'm about to go live. But all right, guys, that's all I have for today's defense preview. And it's going to be a tough one, and I can't wait for Sunday's game. Hopefully Nick Bosa plays, and hopefully Brock Purdy can sink the Bucs. If you guys missed my offense preview episode talking about Brock Purdy and what he's up against in this game, go ahead and check that out. It's on my channel. That video came out on Wednesday. And guys, have a good rest of your night. Have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you on Sunday right after the game. Peace.